They set off the corridor together. Nearly headless Nick, Harry noticed, was still holding Sir Patrick's rejection letter. I wish there was something I could do for you about the headless hunt, Harry said. Nearly headless Nick stopped in his tracks, and Harry walked right through him. He wished he hadn't. It was like stepping through an icy shower. But there is something you could do for me, said Nick excitedly. Harry, would I be asking too much? But no, you wouldn't want. What is it? Said Harry. Well, this Halloween will be my 500th death day, said Nearly Headless Nick, drawing himself up and looking dignified. Oh, said Harry, not sure whether he should look sorry or happy about this. Right. I'm holding a party down in one of the roomier dungeons. Friends will be coming from all over the country. It'd be such an honor if you would attend. Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger would be most welcome too, of course, but I dare say you'd rather go to the school feast? He watched Harry on tenterhooks. No, said Harry quickly, I'll come. My dear boy, Harry Potter at my death day party, and he hesitated, looking so excited. Do you think you could possibly mention to Sir Patrick how very frightening and impressive you find me? Of course, said Harry. Nearly headless Nick beamed at him. Beamed means smile. A death day party? Said Hermione keenly, when Harry had changed at last and joined her and Ron in the common room. I bet there aren't many living people who can say they've been to one of those. It'll be fascinating. Why would anyone want to celebrate the day they died? Said Ron, who was halfway through his potions homework and grumpy. Sounds depressing to me. Rain was still lashing the windows, which were now inky black, but inside all looked bright and cheerful. The firelight glowed over the countless squashy armchairs where people sat reading, talking, doing homework, or in that case of Fred and George Weasley, trying to find out what would happen if you fed a filibuster firework to a salamander. Fred had rescued the brilliant orange fire-dwelling lizard from a care of magical creatures class, and it was now smoldering gently on a table surrounded by a knot of curious people. Harry was on the point of telling Ron and Hermione about Filch and Quickspell, when the salamander suddenly whizzed into the air, emitting loud sparks and bangs as it whirled wildly around the room. The sight of Percy bellowing himself hoarse at Fred and George, the spectacular display of tangerine stars showering from the salamander's mouth, and its escape into the fire, with accompanying explosions, drove both Filch and the Quickspell envelope from Harry's mind. By the time Halloween had arrived, Harry was regretting his rash promise to go to the Death Day party. The rest of the school was happily anticipating their Halloween feast. The Great Hall had been decorated with the usual live bats. Hagrid's vast pumpkins had been carved into lanterns, large enough for 3 men to sit in, and there were rumors that Dumbledore had booked a troupe of dancing skeletons for entertainment. A promise is a promise, Hermione reminded Harry. You said you'd go to the Death Day party. So at 7 o'clock, Harry, Ron, and Hermione walked straight past the doorway to the packed Great Hall, which was glittering invitingly with gold plates and candles, and directed their steps instead towards the dungeons. The passageway leading to Nearly Headless Nick's party had been lined with candles too, though the effect was far from cheerful. These were long, thin, jet-black tapers, all burning bright blue, casting a dim, ghostly light even over their own living faces. The temperature dropped with every step they took. As Harry shivered and drew his robes tightly around him, he heard what sounded like 1,000 fingernails scraping an enormous blackboard. Is that supposed to be music? Ron whispered. They turned a corner and saw Nearly Headless Nick standing at a doorway hung with black velvet drapes. My dear friends, he said mournfully, welcome, welcome. So pleased you could come. He swept off his plumed hat and bowed them inside. It was an incredible sight. The dungeon was full of hundreds of pearly white, translucent people, mostly drifting around a crowded dance floor, waltzing to the dreadful, quavering sound of 30 musical saws played by an orchestra on a black-draped platform. A chandelier overhead blazed midnight blue with 1,000 more black candles. Their breath rose in a mist before them. It was like stepping into a freezer. Shall we have a look around? Harry suggested, wanting to warm up his feet. Careful not to walk through anyone, said Ron nervously, and they set off around the edge of the dance floor. They passed a group of gloomy nuns, a ragged man wearing chains, and the fat friar, a cheerful Hufflepuff ghost, who was talking to a knight with an arrow sticking out of its forehead. Harry wasn't surprised to see that the Bloody Baron, a gaunt, staring Slytherin ghost covered in silver stains, was being given a wide berth by other ghosts. Oh, no, said Hermione, stopping abruptly. Turn back, turn back. I don't want to talk to Moaning Myrtle. Who? Said Harry as they backtracked quickly. She haunts the girls' toilets on the first floor, said Hermione. She haunts a toilet? Yeah, it's been out of order all year because she keeps having tantrums and flooding the place. I never went in there anyway, if I could avoid it. It's awful trying to go to the loo with her wailing. Wailing means just crying. Look, food, said Ron. On the other side of the dungeon was a long table, also covered in black velvet. They approached it eagerly, but next moment had to stop in their tracks, horrified. The smell was quite disgusting. Large, rotten fish were laid on handsome silver platters. Cakes, burned charcoal black, were heaped on salvers. There was a great maggoty haggis, a slab of cheese covered in furry green mold, and, in pride of a place, an enormous gray cake in the shape of a tombstone, with tar-like icing forming the words Sir Nicholas, died the 31st of October, 1492. That was 600 years ago. Harry watched amazed as a portly ghost approached the table, crouching low and walking through it, his mouth held so wide that it passed through one of the stinking salmon. Can you taste any of it if you walk through it? Harry asked him. Almost, said the ghost sadly, and he drifted away. I expect they've left it to rot to give it a stronger flavor, said Hermione knowledgeably, pinching her nose and leaning closer to look at the putrid haggis. Can we move? I feel sick, said Ron. They had barely turned around, however, when a little man swooped suddenly from under the table and came to a halt mid-air before them. Hello, Peeves, said Harry cautiously. Unlike the ghosts around them, Peeves the poltergeist was the very reverse of a pale and transparent. He was wearing a bright orange party hat, a revolving bow tie, and a broad grin on his wide, wicked face. Nibbles, he said sweetly, offering them a bowl of peanuts covered in fungus. No thanks, said Hermione. I heard you talking about poor Myrtle, said Peeves, his eyes dancing. Rude you were about poor Myrtle. He took a deep breath and bellowed, Oi, Myrtle! Oh, no, Peeves, don't tell her what I said. She'll be really upset, said Hermione, whispered frantically. I didn't mean it. I don't mind her. Hello, Myrtle. The squat ghost of a girl had glided over. She had the glummiest face Harry had ever seen, half hidden behind lank hair and thick, pearly spectacles. What? She said sulkily. How are you, Myrtle? Said Hermione in a false, bright voice. It's so nice to see you out of the toilet. Myrtle sniffed. Miss Granger was just talking about you, said Peeves into Myrtle's ear. Just saying how nice you look tonight, said Hermione, glaring at Peeves. Myrtle eyed Hermione suspiciously. You're making fun of me, she said, silver teals wailing rapidly in her small see-through eyes. No, honestly, didn't I just say how nice Myrtle was looking? Said Hermione, nudging Harry and Ron painfully in the ribs. Oh, yeah, she did. Don't lie to me, Myrtle gasped, tears now flooding down her face while Peeves chuckled happily over her shoulder. Do you think I don't know what people call me behind my back? Miserable, moaning, moping Myrtle. You've missed out Spotty, Peeves hissed in her ear. Moaning Myrtle burst into anguished sobs and fled from the dungeon. Peeves shot after her, pelting her with moldy peanuts, saying, Spotty, Spotty. Oh, dear, said Hermione sadly. Nearly Headless Nick now drifted towards them through the crowd. Are you enjoying yourselves? Oh, yes, they lied. Not a bad turnout, said Nearly Headless Nick proudly. The Wailing Widow came all the way up from Kent. It's nearly time for my speech. I'd better go and warn the orchestra. The orchestra, however, stopped playing at that very moment. They and everyone else in the dungeon fell silent, looking around in excitement as a hunting horn sounded. Ooh, here we go, said Nearly Headless Nick. Though the dungeon wall burst, a dozen ghost horses, each ridden by a headless horseman. The assembly clapped wildly, and Harry started to clap too, but stopped quickly at the sight of Nick's face. The horses galloped in the middle of the dance floor and halted, rearing and plunging, a large ghost at the front whose bearded head was under his arm. Blowing the horn, leapt down, lifted his head high in the air so he could see over the crowd. Everyone laughed. And strode over to Nearly Headless Nick, squashing his head in the back of his neck. Nick, he roared, how are you? Is your head still hanging on there? He gave a hearty guffaw and clapped Nearly Headless Nick on the shoulder. Welcome, Patrick, said Nick stiffly. Livens, said Sir Patrick, spotting Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and gave a huge, fake jump of astonishment so that his head fell off again. The crowd howled with laughter. Very amusing, said Nearly Headless Nick sadly. Don't mind Nick, shouted Sir Patrick, still upset we won't let him in to join the hunt. But I mean to say, look. I think, said Harry hurriedly at a meaningful look from Nick. Nick's very frightened and... Ha! Yelled Sir Patrick's head. Betty asked you to say that. If I could have everyone's attention, it's time for my speech, said Nearly Headless Nick loudly, striding towards the podium and climbing into an icy blue spotlight. My late lament lords, ladies, and gentlemen, it is my great sorrow. But nobody heard much more. Sir Patrick and the rest of the Headless Hunt had just started a game of head hockey, and the crowd was turning to watch. Nearly Headless Nick tried vainly to recapture his audience, but gave up, as Sir Patrick's head went sailing past him to loud cheers. Harry was cold by now, not to mention hungry. All right, we'll stop there.